I'm going to turn us now to our final speaker. It's my pleasure to introduce David Keeve, who's the Director of Public Engagement at the White House's Council on Environmental Quality. And he's going to share with us the highlights of the president's domestic climate policy agenda and the need for sustained action as the U.S. heads into COP in 2 weeks. David, thank you for joining us today.
Verena, thank you so much for having me. And I apologize for sort of the funny angle here and for being a minute or two late. We had some technical issues, so I'm joining via phone, but I'm delighted to be here with all of you this afternoon. Let me first say thank you to you all at the Center for Climate and Energy Solutions and the Climate Registry for putting together this event. We are really bowled over by the level of corporate interest in supporting the administration's priorities and supporting the Paris Climate Agreement. We are all mindful as part of the Biden-Harris administration that our ability to meet our commitment to the rest of the world is only still within reach and intact because of the actions of the private sector, of states, of municipalities, and others over the past 5 years. So Glasgow should be a tremendous celebration and a great opportunity for America to continue to show our renewed leadership around the world. But I wanted to focus a little bit on the president's domestic climate agenda because our ability to move forward with his priorities legislatively will send a powerful signal to Paris, to Glasgow, and to the rest of the world. Climate is a top priority for me. It's what I focus on every single day, but it's also a top priority for every single one of my colleagues here within the administration because, for a simple reason, because it's a top priority for the president. We hear about it from him every single day, and importantly, he talks about it publicly just about every single day, including last Friday, which was a really joyous day in which he rededicated 3 national monuments, Bears Ears, Grand Staircase Escalante, and the Northeast Canyons and Seamounts. Importantly, he spoke off the cuff during his remarks there. He said it was the easiest day of his presidency because there was no decision that he had to linger over less than the decision to restore those national monuments. It speaks to his passion and knowledge about the issues. Earlier today, we put forward a suite of new announcements related to climate financial risk and the risk that climate plays on our economy and on our financial institutions. It's the moving forward of actions that the president asked us to take back in May when he signed an executive order on climate-related financial risk, and shows how we at the staff level have moved to implement the president's vision. It's just yet another of the actions that we're taking every single day to try to move forward and combat the climate crisis. But the biggest tool that we have in our toolkit in order to combat the climate crisis is legislative action. Our priorities there are really simple. All we really need to do is pass 2 big bills, the Infrastructure Improvement, Investment and Jobs Act and his Build Back Better agenda via reconciliation. Let me first talk a little bit about the infrastructure bill and why that's important from a climate perspective. As we've all seen, and you all have all experienced, and your customers, your employees, your shareholders, and probably yourselves have experienced, we're dealing with an uptick in extreme weather events recently. Last year was the most expensive on record. It cost our economy over $100 billion. We can expect that this year, when all is said and done, will be even more expensive than last year. Every year brings with it a new record in terms of total cost. But the costs, the financial costs are only one element. The disruption, dislocation, death, and devastation that these extreme weather events wreak on our communities and on our economy are terrible and unfortunately have only gotten worse. In order to address that, the infrastructure bill makes a lot of key investments. It's got a $50 billion investment to make our communities more resilient from the impacts of extreme weather and climate change. It also makes key investments in preparing the way for us to transition to an economy powered by clean energy by making long overdue investments in our energy grid. And we've seen failures in that grid over the past year that have really been eye-opening in terms of our ability to function and move forward as an economy and as a country. And then finally, it addresses environmental injustice, most notably by providing the funding to get rid of lead service lines in our drinking water, which is something that should have been done a long time ago and that we desperately need to correct. Overall, there's a $55 billion investment in the infrastructure bill in drinking water infrastructure, which is really, really important. And then last but not least, every single foot of bridge and road that we repair, we're going to do it in as sustainable and a resilient way as we possibly can, and be as thoughtful to the climate impacts of the materials that we use as we possibly can, and do it in a way that we've never done before. But there's more that's needed. And specifically, there's more that's needed to address the root cause of what's driving these extreme weather events, which is, of course, the climate crisis. That's why we need the president's Build Back Better agenda. The Build Back Better agenda will tackle greenhouse gas emissions in two really important and key ways. The first is it'll implement a series of tax incentives and tax cuts to incentivize good behavior. It'll stretch them out over a 10-year period because that's the time horizon that's needed to amplify investment in the development of clean energy. We're seeing it in the auto sector now. The investments that companies like Ford, General Motors, Stellantis, and others are making today are designed to make sure that over the next 10 years, they transition their fleets to electric vehicles. This may be oversharing, but I am a personal embodiment of the idea that these tax credits and tax cuts work. I've only in my life ever bought one really, truly new car. That was in 2018 when I bought a Chrysler Pacifica hybrid minivan, specifically because of the $7,500 tax credit that was there for it. And this is far afield from climate specifically, but I live in an area here in the District of Columbia that has pre-K4 already. And when my daughter was fortunate to get in off of the wait list for pre-K4 in DC Public School, that meant an after-tax raise for my family of over $2,000 a month, which is what I had been paying in daycare costs. And it was a happy day in our family when we took her for her first day of school just after Labor Day. So I'm proof that these tax credits and tax cuts really work. And I can personally testify that they make the beneficiaries of them very happy. Secondly, we're going to drive down greenhouse gas emissions by creating a clean electricity performance plan. This will set a series of targets for utilities to change their energy to clean sources. And I know that you've heard from several utility executives earlier. This is a market-based approach that for utilities that are already transitioning to clean electricity, will provide some incentive for them to move a little faster. And for ones that are moving a little more slowly than we'd like, it'll provide a series of incentives as well in the form of penalties for them to speed up and move faster. It's an important framework that will help us to reach one of the president's signature commitments on climate, which is that we'll have a 100% net zero power sector by the year 2035. And then the final way in which we plan to address climate via the reconciliation package is by creating a civilian climate corps, which is going to put hundreds of thousands of young people to work in our community, within their communities, within national parks, within creating green space in their communities, and to build resilience out across the country. All of these priorities are really, really important and are critical to us to meet the goal, the nationally determined contribution that the country agreed to the rest of the world when we re-entered Paris and recommitted to the Paris Climate Agreement. That, of course, is a commitment that will get to a 50 to 52% reduction versus 2005 levels by the year 2030. We're fond of saying there are many pathways to reach our commitment and our nationally determined contribution on climate. But let's be very clear. The fastest, most direct, easiest way to get there is via the legislation that is immediately before Congress right now. What I would like to do is first say thank you to all of the companies that are out there that have already raised their voice to support the climate provisions within the Build Back Better agenda, and specifically said that if we're serious about addressing the climate crisis, that we need to do it via reconciliation. Everyone at the White House has noticed those commitments, They appreciate them, and we are very, very much aware of who has raised their hand and said, we're for Paris. We're excited to go to Glasgow. We're excited to announce our own commitments. But if the federal government is going to get there themselves, they need to pass legislation in order to do it, and we support that legislation. To the companies that are out there that have not yet raised their voice and said, we support what the administration is doing on climate via reconciliation, I'd ask that you consider doing it now. And to those that are opposing the reconciliation package, the companies and trade groups that aren't happy with every element of what we're trying to do via reconciliation, I would ask them a tough question, which is, if you're supportive of our re-entry into Paris, if you're supportive of our nationally determined contribution on climate, how do you think that we're going to get there but for the legislation that's before Congress right now, and that gives us the best chance of taking meaningful action via legislation to address the climate crisis that we've had in at least a decade or more, and that may be our best shot for this presidency and this administration. So, Verena, thank you so much for having me on. It's really an honor to be here, and it's a terrific platform. And thank you again to the Climate Registry and to C2ES for all that you've done to help get businesses that want to do the right thing the tools that they need in order to do it on climate.
You'd think I'd figure out how to get off mute after nearly 2 years in COVID. Thank you so much for joining us today. I know this is a really important time. It's a critical 2 weeks that we have both domestically and internationally. And so I really appreciate you coming to address our audience. We've had over 1,000 attendees at our conference, many of which are in the business community, many of which are business leaders. So thank you for your time today.
Thank you.
All right. So I'd like to bring up Amy Holm, Executive Director of the Climate Registry. Amy, so we are at the end here. We've hosted a lot of people. We've heard a lot of different perspectives. And here we are.
Verena, it's been such a great week, right? And it's been an honor to welcome so many new sustainability professionals to our Climate Leadership Series and community.
That's right. And to all of you that are in the audience, thank you so much for participating in these important conversations on the road to COP26. And not only on the road to COP26, but the road after COP26 as we look to living in a world where net zero emissions are our reality. Since many of you have been chatting or exchanging questions, as a reminder, our event in Hop-In will stay open for the remainder of the day. So please keep the conversations going. If you found people you'd like to network with, visit our exhibit hall and share your favorite moments from the conference with the larger climate community. I had a lot of favorites. Amy, I don't know about you.
Thanks, Verena. I did too. And our theme this year is Ambition to Action, Mobilizing for a Decade of Decarbonization. And I'm really proud of the discussions that we've hosted over the last few days, featuring true climate leaders who are indeed taking meaningful actions towards ambitious goals. I hope that all our participants have found the last days of this, or the last few days of our content informative, engaging, and inspiring. I know I have, but it doesn't end here. Our Climate Leadership Series continues into the fall with expert-led webinars and workshops. And our first program will be hosted on Thursday, October 28th, featuring a chat with Apple's Vice President of Environment, Policy, and Social Initiatives, Lisa Jackson, followed by a discussion on natural climate solutions. So we look forward to sharing more about these upcoming series and to seeing you at the next Climate Leadership event in 2022. Bye, everybody.
Thank you. Bye.